What is going on, guys? Well, we are at the end of another month. October is here. Halloween season has begun, and so we have the month of September to talk about, of which I was able to see 8 films. Now, I am going to be cheating just a little bit this month because I was under the weather a good bit of August and a good bit of the beginning of September. There were a few films that I missed and had to catch up on, as well as a couple of films that just debuted on VOD in September. And so there's 3 movies in this list that aren't technically September movies, but fuck it. Who's going to sue me? And this is kind of a funky month because the bottom half of my list is just a kind of a train wreck for a lot of different reasons. And then there's 3 pretty good movies up at the top that are still in kind of a peculiar order. So this is going to be a weird one. Let me know your thoughts on these films down below. Starting off at number 8 is a little horror film called Natty Knocks. Now, a lot of you probably are not familiar with this one. I saw this get shared quite a bit over social media, strictly because of the names attached. In the cast, you have Bill Moseley, you have Robert Englund, and you have Danielle Harris, as well as the director of Halloween 4. So a little bit of a Halloween 4 reunion there with the director and Danielle Harris. And a lot of people were tagging me on this on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else and sharing the trailer around. And I got to be honest, I saw the trailer. I thought the trailer was terrible. And I'm not one of those people that, despite loving a lot of the people that are involved with this movie and the careers and their previous works, I'm not somebody that gets too excited about names attached if the product that they're attached to does not interest me. So I watched this one purely out of morbid curiosity. And this is going to end up easily as one of the worst films that I've seen this year. The story here is just kind of something that's thrown together, and you have essentially this witch burning at the beginning of the film, and then time jumps to modern times, and the legend of that witch is kind of prevalent in this town, and there's this little ding-dong ditch game that people will play called Natty Knocks that kind of calls back to the witch that is the legend of this town. Danielle Harris is the mom of the kids that are involved in doing these games every once in a while, and Bill Moseley is basically a serial killer. And so you have all these different things thrown together to where it's like, where does the serial killer angle meet up with the witch angle, and how are these kids going to be involved? And it's just a dreadful movie. I'm sorry. Like, nothing but respect and love to the people that made it. And I don't know if they really were passionate about this or if this was just a paycheck, but it was pretty miserable to watch. I think the acting all around, aside from the horror alumni that most of us are here to see, was pretty horrible. The script and the story just had nothing of merit for me. So like, I hate being this negative on a movie. I usually try to find some positive in there. And I guess saying that Danielle Harris looks great and still acts great, and Robert Englund and Bill Moseley still bring a really cool presence to a horror film, no matter how big or small their role is about as positive as I can get. Everything else about this, it was just an absolute dreadful horror film. So I guess if you're morbidly curious, check it out on VOD. It wasn't very expensive, but there's nothing I can recommend about this one. Number 7 is a movie called Inside with Willem Dafoe. And this is where it starts to get weird because Inside is a very well-made movie. This is essentially a bottle film to where you have Willem Dafoe playing this thief, and he breaks into this really like fancy, high-tech, high-rise apartment to get this painting, and he somehow gets locked inside of it, and the people that he is working for basically abandon him. And so he is locked in this apartment that has no food, no running water, nothing for presumably weeks, maybe even months. And so it's a movie basically about him trying to find ways out and slowly kind of losing his mind and trying to survive. And that was an intriguing premise for me. This came out in theaters earlier this year, but it just dropped on Amazon Prime. And so I watched this, and the problem with the film for me is that whenever you have a scenario like this, where it's one actor, one location, and that's your entire film, you have to have an actor or a performance that is very lively and charismatic and something that can keep the audience's attention for 90 or more minutes in a scenario that really is built more for a short. And Willem Dafoe has that ability, but they don't utilize that ability. He only has about 5, maybe 6 lines in the film. And so it just becomes a bit of an endurance test where it's interesting for the first half hour or so, seeing how he's going to survive. And then it just kind of becomes really slow and redundant as he's just continuously finding trying to do something that comes to a stalemate and he has to go try something else. And the movie ends very open-ended as well. So it was just an experience for me that I don't know who I could recommend this movie to, and I absolutely would never watch it again. It's very well made, so if you're interested in it, if this is the type of movie for you, it's well done. It's just, as far as rewatch value, it is so low on my list because of just how drawn out a very simple concept was. Coming in at number 6 is going to be The Nun II. And unfortunately, this is a movie that I had some hope for after the early reactions were saying that it was such a significant leap in quality over the first film. A lot of people that I trust and usually agree with said that. And maybe they were just in a much better mood than I was. I don't know. I went to go see this, and I didn't think that this was much of an improvement on the first Nun whatsoever. And The Nun, I believe, is my least favorite of the Conjuring films. And so this one is kind of in competition for that. I mean, it's slickly produced. It's well shot. You have some good, capable actors in here, like Thaisa Farmiga, who is a really good actress that I wish she would do some more things outside of the Nun franchise, because she has the talent for it. And Valak is a really cool, creepy-looking entity that just, his movies just don't add anything. Like, the presence of Valak in The Conjuring was awesome, and whenever it's a standalone movie that focuses on Valak, it just feels like it's a haunted house animatronic or something. And that's basically what the Nun films are to me, is like this haunted house ride where you lock in, you just go through these corridors and things jump out at you. And that was much more of an issue in the first film than this one. This one at least tries to have different locations and some other things to do, but it still relegates itself to being a very generic studio-produced horror film that is just riddled with jump scares and doesn't offer much else beyond that. So another film in the Conjuring franchise that, to me, just absolutely taints the quality of the overall universe. Coming in at number 5 is going to be a comedy called Bottoms, and this came out at the very tail end of August, but unfortunately I couldn't see it until the night that Nun II came out. I did a double feature, which was a very weird double feature, I will say. But yeah, Bottoms, I don't know. This was a comedy that was very much marketed to like the Gen Z crowd, and it was wearing kind of the whole like queer comedy thing on its sleeve. And so it looked unique, it looked intriguing, and I was very curious about it because I still hold out hope. Every time there's a new comedy out there that has a lot of people buzzing and talking about how good it is it finally going to be the comedy that makes me laugh again? Because I've been on record numerous times over the last couple of years that just comedies are dead to me. Like, even the really, really good ones that come out are more like dramedies. That's kind of a unfortunate byproduct of the success that Judd Apatow had in his early career. And I just don't feel like comedies have the edge or have the bite that they used to. So I went to go check this out, was very curious. And while there is absolutely an audience for this, there are people that would walk into this film and think that this is like the comedy film of their generation and the best comedy of the year, maybe in years, and they were just on the floor the entire time. I unfortunately was not part of that crowd. This to me had very similar appeal to Bodies, Bodies, Bodies last year, which was one of my least favorite films, in that the pacing and the wit and the snark and the style of comedy is very much geared toward an audience that is younger than me and just has a different outlook than me. And so essentially you got this film to where these two girls who are gay make like a underground fight club within their high school to try to trick cheerleaders into sleeping with them. And it ends up causing like this bit of a hierarchy issue to where the football players, who are usually the kings of the school, are now trying to like dismantle this fight club and expose them as liars. And it is so over the top in like the high school fantasy exaggeration that this is a movie you can't take serious whatsoever. It's not meant to be. To where literally students are cussing in school, and they like the football players basically have thrones in the classrooms. Like, it's really fantastical. And it just didn't work for me. I don't know. It just doesn't operate on my comedy wavelength, I guess. There's not really like objective things that I can say about the film that didn't work. It's just not a comedy that's made for me. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Expendables 4, a movie that objectively is worse than just about every movie it is above except for Natty Knocks. And it's only rewatch value that holds it this high. Like I said, this is a fucked up month as far as rankings. On paper, this should be last or next to last. But I'm very easily entertained when it comes to action films of a certain degree. And the Expendables franchise is absolutely a franchise that is made for me. A fan of the gory and gritty macho action films of the 80s and 90s. To me, the first film succeeded the most at that. Second one still had some merit. Third one still had some merit, even though they watered it down to PG-13. But this fourth film, it was basically just marketed as Return of the R rating. You guys come to the theaters because it's rated R. And that worried me. It's like, okay, if a bunch of CGI blood is what you're trying to get us all into the theaters with, you must not have much else. And so me and Uncle Sean went to go see this after the press screening of The Creator. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And it was shocking how much of a step down this film was from the previous films, to where the point of Expendables is to get these action stars of the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s together to have an old school, blow shit up, really punch people in the fucking face, gritty action film, and just complete throwback. And they slowly lost sight of that as the movies went on. Expendables 4 completely loses sight of that, because I don't think there was a single shot in this movie that was real. It was all shot on some kind of soundstage. It was all shot with green screen. I mean, even simple scenes like Stallone walking up to Jason Statham's house and knocking on the front door looks fake. It looks like they just put a door in a hallway and green screened around it. All the action scenes, aside from a bit of, physical fisticuffs shots, were completely fabricated in a computer, to where you have shots of a car and a stuntman or even like a fucking dummy, and then they zoom in on Jason Statham and it's just him holding a gun with green screen behind him. Every single shot of this movie just dismantles the realism and the believability and the escapism that this is supposed to be. Beyond that, you also have choices made in the film regarding who is going to be there for most of the story and who the roster of the Expendables are, that again kind of tosses out the entire concept. This is more or less a Jason Statham action film with a couple of guest spots by Stallone and Randy Couture and Dolph Lundgren, and you got Megan Fox in here, who I expected to hate, and to her credit, I did not hate her, although I don't think she fits in this whatsoever. She does do as good as she can to kind of be believable in that role, but she's essentially the leader of the Expendables. And it's like, guys, how the fuck did we go from the first film to now Megan Fox and friends in the fourth film? All of that being said, I still had a decent enough time watching the action here and watching the gunplay and the heads exploding and the Jason Statham action, which still was performed pretty well as far as his hand-to-hand combat and stuff. There was still some dumb joy that I got out of this. So besides the fact that on paper, objectively, this is a terrible movie that, for all intents and purposes, probably destroyed and killed the Expendables franchise forever, and should be at the bottom of this list, it's a little higher because I would rather rewatch this than the films below it. Whew, now we are out of the just negative side of this list. I'm sorry if that was just dreadful to get through, hearing me just bash every single movie that I've talked about so far. It's exhausting for me too. But the top three are movies that I can be quite positive on. So coming in at number 3 is going to be Gareth Edwards' new film, The Creator. And this is a movie that I was very curious about. This was one of a lot of people's most anticipated film of September. Have this big, epic sci-fi movie, sci-fi action film coming out, which when they're good, they're amazing. They're among some of the best films of all time. I've been curious about John David Washington. He's an actor that has not quite sold me yet, but I was curious what he was going to do here. And Gareth Edwards, I have a funny relationship with, because pretty much every film that he comes out with, I think, looks amazing, is shot amazing. The special effects are amazing, but the story and the characters always tend to let me down. So this seemed like maybe this is the one. Maybe this is the one where Gareth finally delivers a film that delivers all the way around for me. And it wasn't quite that. Again, just like all the other films, it's beautifully shot. Cinematography is immaculate. The special effects are flawless, and it makes you wonder how the hell movies that have 2-3 times the budget of this look like ass when the CGI and the special effects in this film are pristine and look real and just are flawless from start to finish. I do think that The performance of John David Washington, as well as the little girl whose name I flubbed in my review, and I can't remember right now, so shame on me. But the two main performances are very good. The emotion that is drawn out of them on screen is very good. And the story was intriguing enough that I was always interested in what was going to happen next. The problem with the film is that for me, it's incredibly derivative. It is very much highly influenced by a lot of other sci-fi classics, some of the best and most celebrated movies of all time. And to the amount that they were influenced, it's just very apparent on screen. And so you'll have people that love the fact that it has all these influences and mixes them together into this soup and has this brand new movie, The Creator, and because it does its own spin on all these things. And then you're going to have people that look and they go, this is like the setup of Terminator and the world building of Blade Runner and iRobot with the plot of Last of Us and a little bit of that Avatar, Last Samurai, Fern Gully flavor in there of, you know, switching allegiances and seeing the error of your ways and the merit of the other side. It has so many of those things. And I've seen a lot of other people name things like Akira and other things that I'm just not familiar with. So there's even more that are very apparent. And for me, it just kind of became like this greatest hits rehash of a lot of other movies that I like more than this one, and I celebrate more than this one. And so that disappointed me. And it's also caused me to be very frustrated with the conversation that has surrounded the release of this film, because, you know, now we're about a week or so outside of the theatrical release, and so far it looks like this movie is not going to make very much money. And it does deserve to make more than it's going to make. It is a good film, and by the filmmaker that obviously is a master of his craft as far as creating this world and visually bringing a film together. Story-wise, I still think he has some work to do, but it's a movie that is good and deserves to succeed, but it looks like it's not going to succeed. And rather than ask rational questions about why that happened, the vast majority of the conversation that I've seen surrounding this film on social media is kind of like finger pointing and condescension at everybody that was not interested in it, saying, you're the reason why this failed. You should never say ever again that we don't get original films. If you didn't pay to see this movie, then you're the problem. And the issue that I take with that is that this is not an original film. I'm sorry. Technically, is it? Because it's not a sequel, it's not a reboot, it's not tied to a previously established IP. Sure, on paper, I guess you can use that term, but that's not the context that people are using it. They're using original as in this movie that is very different from other things that we have gotten before. And it's not that. It was apparent that it was not that from the trailer. I could gain a lot of the influences that this movie was taking after from the trailer, and I kind of walked in knowing it was probably going to have a little bit of that, but didn't realize how much that was going to be there until I saw the full film. And so you have a lot of people that are much more selective with their money and their time in the theaters nowadays that probably got a vibe that this is not so original. A lot of the early reactions of the movie were super high positive, overwhelmingly just all the big words, the little Mad Libs pull quotes that people give on Twitter whenever they're the first people to see a film. And then after you started to see like the Fantastic Fest reactions and the press screening reactions, it started to even out somewhere in the middle to where you had high highs and you had people in the middle saying it's pretty derivative. And I was a part of that conversation. And so a lot of people chose not to see it. And I don't think that's worth finger pointing and shaming people, because this is not nearly as original as you're trying to make it seem. It's not like this thing is this brand new concept and this wild, wacky concept and all these brand new storylines, and it's just amazing, never seen anything like it before, and you let it fail. It's not. It's greatest hits of a bunch of other movies that we have at home and can watch for free. So it deserves to succeed. I'm not arguing that. But anybody that is doing the finger pointing game, you need to shut the fuck up, because I think you're completely misguided in that. And there's issues there. There's certainly issues with which films get funded and which films get promoted over the others, and, you know, which films are getting made more than the others, that are absolutely a valid conversation. But the way that you are using the creator to springboard into that, I think, is very misguided. So nonetheless, rant over. The Creator, good film. If you like sci-fi movies, if you like Gareth Edwards films, you'll enjoy it, but just manage your expectations with how original this is, because for all of the promotion of best new epic original film, I challenge the use of the word original. Coming in at number 2 is going to be The Equalizer 3, a movie that is not as well made as the creator, but again, rewatch value. I would rewatch Equalizer 3. I would rewatch Equalizer 3 probably a dozen times before I rewatch the creator. So you've got Denzel Washington back in action. The Equalizer franchise has always been a good action franchise. Of the 3 films, there's none of them that I would call great, amazing, among the best action films of all time, but it does that throwback action thing very well and delivers a solid experience of what fans of that genre want every single time. So I've enjoyed all of them, walked into 3 excited, and I really enjoyed what they gave here. I mean, you got Denzel Washington, who is just effortlessly charismatic and charming and badass all at the same time. He just has so many different colors to his performance as this character, to where it's like you want to hang out with the dude, at the same time you want to fear him. I think that the setting that they put him in this little town was a nice change of pace, and him having a much more of a personal motivation to kind of save this town and preserve the innocence of this town that he really enjoys and feels at home with by taking out these mobsters. And the action in it was pretty solid, although I feel like it was front-loaded. The best action sequence opens the film. Then you have quite a bit of exposition and him just kind of integrate into this town, and then it gets action-heavy again in the third act. So maybe not as action-packed as people would want it to be, but overall, I enjoyed this. The only negatives that I have with it, really, aside from it just being, again, another solid action adventure, nothing that's aiming to be the best of all time, is that the villains are probably the weakest of the franchise, the least memorable of the franchise. And Dakota Fanning, while it was nice to see her in here as kind of a Man on Fire reunion and see her interact with Denzel again, I feel like her integration into the story almost feels like it was rewrites after somebody got the good idea to cast Dakota Fanning in this. Like, it just feels like a distraction from the main story. So it doesn't derail anything, but those were the moments where I was like, I don't really care about this. Can we get back to Denzel kicking ass, please? So really enjoyed this one. If you're a fan of the first 2, I'm sure you'll be a fan of the third one. But coming in at number 1, holy shit, the shock of the year thus far, Saw X. People, these are the moments that I live for. You have a movie that I had little to no interest in. I had zero faith in. I was an absolute naysayer. I usually try to maintain kind of a realistic tone. I was absolutely pessimistic about this movie. I don't despise the Saw franchise, but more than half of the movies I don't really care for, and the fact that they have tried to reboot it twice in the past number of years, and now we're trying a third time, just made me roll my eyes. And my God, if I did not really enjoy this movie to the point where it might be my favorite Saw film. I still need to kind of think on that before I drop my official ranking, but it has a solid chance of the 10th film in a franchise being the best for me. And these are the times that I love to be wrong. There's a lot of people out there that think that people like me, other critics, other YouTubers just walk into movies wanting to hate them. And if we're being negative or if we're being, skeptical in any way, we're just going to walk in with that and we're going to walk out with that no matter what. And the times that I'm able to come out and eat my words and tell everybody that I was wrong and this movie was awesome, those are the best moments of the year. Never do I want to walk into a film and walk out 2 hours later saying, yep, I should have spent that 2 hours and that money elsewhere. When I walk out of it saying, holy shit, that was so much better than I thought it was going to be, I can't wait to tell everybody about it, that's just awesome for me. So this was actually the final secret screening at Fantastic Fest, and I will have a ranking of all 24 films I saw at that festival here in a couple of days, so please stay tuned for that. And this was, of all of the movies that were speculated to be the secret screening, of which the heavy ones were Saw, Exorcist, Five Nights at Freddy's, and Thanksgiving, Saw X was the one that I was least interested to check out. It was the one that I was least curious about. And part of that was because even if it wasn't the secret screening, in 24 hours, I could have seen it anyway at a public screening. But I walked into this and saw it at a festival crowd and walked out. Me and Sean didn't really talk to each other about our thoughts. We recorded our out-of-theater reactions, and I overheard him after I recorded mine saying that this might be his favorite. And I was like, dude, me too. And he was really surprised because he was expecting me, with how negative that I was walking into it, to be like, it was okay. That tells you how good this movie is. Saw X does what has been like the Achilles heel of this franchise since Saw 3, in that it brings Tobin Bell and Jigsaw back, and it actually makes him the protagonist of the film. It makes him the focus of the film for the first time in 10 movies. And it's amazing not only that it took him this long to figure out that that was the right thing to do, but it's amazing how much it does for the movie. And having a lot of buildup and a lot of setup of why he is going to be testing and torturing these people also really helped the movie for me, because especially after like Saw 3, and even to a degree in the first films, some of the logic and the morality regarding the traps and who was being tested and why they were being tested was always really kind of spotty to me. This one, you're introduced to people to where when they're in those traps, you're like, yeah, fuck them. They deserve to be there. Hopefully they learn their lesson. If not, oh well. The traps to me were solid, among some of the better ones of the franchise. I don't know if they're as iconic as some of the more iconic ones in the first couple of movies, but they were good. The gore was good. And I just enjoyed the story and the character development, which how many Saw movies could you say that for? Honestly, so yeah, this is a movie that I was shocked how much I liked it. And it's kind of excited me to the point where I'm actually planning on doing a number of Saw rankings, when previous to seeing it, I was like, I'll rank the movies again, and then who cares? So, yeah, I'm glad to say that Saw X is awesome, and it's my number one of September. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews, and I'm also going to put my previous ranking of the Saw films up here for you to check out and get primed for the couple of rankings that I have over the next 2 weeks, including the movies, possibly the villains and the twists, but absolutely the traps. Like, share, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of it. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes. That doesn't mean you have to be.